What's the truth about TJ Dottery's wild path to LSU, and what kind of impact can he make in 2026? We'll discuss Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked on Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. You know, when Lane Kiffin came to LSU and the portal opened, one of the gigantic storylines was going to be how many players would follow Kiffin from Ole Miss. And initially, we talked about it. I mean, there were conversations about Trinidad Chambliss and Kejuan Lacey and some really high-profile Ole Miss players. In the end, Ole Miss's run sort of limited that opportunity for a lot of those guys. And Winnie Watkins ended up coming over. Devin Harper, we know Prince Williman was a late add. But maybe none more impactful in 2026, potentially, than TJ Dottery. But TJ Dottery's story is an interesting one. And Lane Kiffin, when he met with reporters earlier in the week, was asked specifically about Dottery's impact. And while the question might have been more so suited toward what a guy like Dottery would mean on the field, remember, TJ Dottery led the SEC with 98 tackles in 2025, his fourth year in college. So 2026, he will be a fifth-year senior coming off a year at Ole Miss where he led the conference in tackles. This is a massive addition on so many levels that we're going to talk about. But when Lane Kiffin was talking about Dottery, it wasn't specifically about his ability to run fast and hit guys and turn and run and cover. It was more about what he brought from a leadership perspective and what's happened to Dottery off the field that's led to his path to LSU. Give a listen.
That was really important to not just get somebody that's been such a good player that have been with for 3 years, have gone through things with, his personal stuff, mine, and just kind of growing together, and then you're able to bring them here was really great. And I just love his story. You know, when things happen to them, especially in his, and all the guy does is just continue to work, continue to develop as a player. He has a personal situation that's been brought up, especially in this chain, you know, him transferring, he gets re-brought up, and something that he was a victim of, and something that people don't talk about this part, that the person that did this to him is now in jail and is unable to do that to other people after doing it to a number of people. So I love that part of his story, that he just persevered through that. People try to continue to distract him and bring those things up. And he knew that. He knew in the transfer, I can stay and do the comfortable, easy thing and stay here. Nobody's going to re-bring up that story of what happened to me at Clemson. Or I can go do the challenging thing that will make me uncomfortable, that he believed was the best for him, and he did it. I think that says a lot about him.
That caught a lot of people's attention. I think overwhelmingly fans know nothing of TJ Dottery's backstory. Some that maybe did a deep dive could find some nefarious things at Clemson, but you can scour the internet and you're not going to find anything on what Lane Kiffin's alluding to, which is a man being arrested for doing something to TJ Dottery. So naturally, I started asking questions, and I can't tell you, and this might be disappointing, but I can't sit here today and report anything factual that I have like ironclad facts. I'm working on it, hope to get there. But let me give you a little bit of the TJ Dottery backstory to kind of catch you up to this moment, what Lane Kiffin's talking about. So TJ Dottery is formerly TJ Dudley. So he was a top 150 overall player in the country in the class of 2022. He signed with Clemson. He redshirted that year, played just 16 snaps, played in 4 games, but maintained his redshirt year. Well, in 2023, in the summer, he transferred from Clemson to Ole Miss. And at the time, Dabo Swinney talked about it being best, and maybe Dottery or Dudley at the time being dismissed from the Clemson program. And without it really an explanation as to why. Well, Dudley would change his name to Dottery. He gave the explanation. That's his father's name. His father's name is Antoine Dottery. And so TJ changed his last name from Dudley to Dottery. No doubt I would have to think in some respect to avoid conversation over what is alleged to have happened that Lane Kiffin's talking about. Actually not alleged, because clearly it happened. There's a man in prison, as Kiffin alluded to. Well, listen, you can do a quick internet search and you can find message board chatter about what is alleged to have happened at Clemson. What is alleged to have happened at Clemson is not what Lane Kiffin said there. What is alleged to have happened at Clemson is that TJ Dudley did some things within the locker room that drew the ire of a lot of teammates and ultimately forced Clemson's hand to move him out of the program. That's what you'll find on the internet. When you dig a little deeper, what I think happened, and without giving too many details, because I don't know that I'm totally comfortable yet reporting all of this, but when Lane Kiffin gives you something definitively as a man is in prison, now it comes to find out that man's name and follow the trail. And as best that I can find, it sounds like as a very young, immature person, TJ Dudley did something that was not illegal, but immature. And that immature decision as a very young person, as an 18-year-old, got him into a situation where he was compromised by this person who was doing illegal things and is now in prison. And that one initial bad decision that was not illegal is what set the wheels in motion for this situation that ultimately forced Dottery out of Clemson, and this man who did commit a crime against then TJ Dudley, and as I understand it, other college football players, has led to this path. So Dottery goes to Ole Miss, changes his name because he transferred in the summer. It was not in the portal window. He had to sit out. Remember, that was before the NCAA allowed in spring of 24 the unlimited transfer rule. So he transfers in the summer of 23 to Ole Miss, sits out, but plays in the bowl game at the end of 23, and then becomes a real key contributor as a redshirt sophomore in 2024. Starts 12 games at linebacker. That 2024 defense, remember, was one of the best, if not the best in the country. Walter Nolan, Princely Uman Mielen, Chris Paul, Trey Amos, TJ Dottery. He was a real key with 76 tackles. That was second on the team. He had 4 double-digit tackle games. So, again, as a first-time starter, third year in college, became a very productive linebacker at Ole Miss, and then returns in 2025 for his 4th season as a redshirt junior. And that was this past year where he led the Ole Miss defense, led the SEC with 98 tackles, started 15 games at linebacker, 5.5 TFLs, 1.5 sacks. So you're talking about a guy that was massively productive and also was named to the SEC Football Leadership Council. If you're talking about a guy who is perceived to be a bad teammate and did things that got him kicked out at Clemson, doesn't necessarily seem like the type of dude that would be added to the SEC Leadership Council. Not something Ole Miss is doing, the SEC Leadership Council. And that alludes to what Lane Kiffin was sort of saying there. This is a guy who stepped out of his comfort zone. Because listen, if TJ Dottery didn't transfer to LSU, nobody's talking about this story at Ole Miss, and we're not talking about it here. Nobody's digging on this anymore again. And I am going to keep digging, and hopefully I can find more concrete information for you. But clearly you have a guy that was centered enough and secure enough in where he is in his life, willing to make this big jump from Ole Miss to LSU, knowing this would be brought up again. And listen, I'm not naive. Of course, there's money involved, but Ole Miss showed they have money, and they could have kept TJ Dottery there if they wanted to. But he made the jump with Lane Kiffin coming to LSU, and I think that could be massively impactful for the Tiger defense in 2026, which is what I kind of want to illustrate as we continue. So stay with us here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite Seahawks, riding with the underdog Patriots, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone has been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. How about if we talk about TJ Dottery, leading the SEC in tackles with 98 this past season. Key contributor, member of the SEC Leadership Council, taking on so much, leaving Ole Miss for his final season, coming to Baton Rouge, taking a leap of faith with Lane Kiffin in a new defense with Blake Baker. That's what TJ Dottery is doing. And these moments remind us of what it takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the field, off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it the extra fire, that grit, never quit. They put the same passion into every model at Mazda. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. And we're brought to you by our friends at Our Lady of the Lake, championship health partner of LSU Athletics. Trust isn't given, it's earned. And just like LSU athletes earn every point on the court, FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, earns trust every day. As LSU's championship health partner, they take care of the Tigers on the court and across Louisiana. Players like DJ Thomas, Flau'jae Johnson, Jada Richard, and Michaela Williams. They trust the Lake to keep them healthy, strong, and in the game. And it's not just for athletes. From sports medicine to pediatrics, heart care to recovery, Our Lady of the Lake brings that same championship-level care to every family they serve. Trust the team that cares for the team you love. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU. Together, we roar. Learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU. So I think we could naturally look at what TJ Dottery means for this 2026 LSU defense. Let's start by looking at what LSU is losing defensively from a defense that was a top 30 defense in the country. You're losing A.J. Halsey, who was second on the team in tackles. So Devon Keys led the team with 92. Now, look, if Halsey had played the bowl game, he would have finished as the team's leading tackler. But Halsey finished with 88. West Weeks was 74. Harold Perkins was fifth on the team with 56 tackles. Then Jack Pyburn with 52. Monster Delane with 45. You see the point. So you're losing a ton of production. Now, you're returning Devon Keys, who was second on the team with 92 tackles. And you're going to return Whit Weeks as well, who clearly just had a very limited role because of how the injuries slowed him. But let's focus on West Weeks, because that's the spot that TJ Dottery is going to be playing opposite Whit Weeks. Okay. So Whit will step back into his role that Devon Keys manned for a bulk of the season. And with West Weeks out, that will be TJ Dottery's spot there in the middle next to West. So West Weeks finished this season having played in 11 games for the Tigers and had 74 tackles, 8 TFLs, 2.5 sacks. He was productive, but sometimes productivity doesn't necessarily equate to good play. Sometimes you can see guys that have a high tackle count. Devon Keys is a pretty good illustration of that. So Devon Keys led LSU with tackles, but if you go look at PFF grades, Keys' overall PFF grade was a 61.2. That was 28th among LSU's defenders. West Weeks was actually lower than that at a 59.1 overall grade. and he had a 54.7 grade in coverage. So Weeks was productive, but wasn't necessarily dynamic. And this was his 5th season in school, remember. So you're replacing a 5th-year linebacker in West Weeks with another 5th-year linebacker in TJ Dottery. So remember, West Weeks at 74 tackles, Dottery led the SEC with 98. So as we talk about Weeks right there with an overall grade from PFF of 59.1, like let's take a look at what TJ Dottery did this season at Ole Miss. So his overall grade at Ole Miss was a 54.4. So again, this is not a very impressive overall grade. The thing, though, that I think is important to note about Dottery is he played 958 defensive snaps. Look, there were some elite level games. Look, he was awesome against the Citadel, had an 85.9 overall grade. But there were other really good grades as well, other good games. And there were some not so good games. Game at Kentucky in week 2, his tackling grade was a 26. His tackling game against Georgia in the college football playoff was a 34.9. So there were moments in the season that weren't great for Dottery, despite the fact that the productivity was there. But the 958 snaps is what I want to sort of focus on, because I think that's the thing that probably needs to be illustrated. You had a guy that in the middle of that defense just never came off the field. Playing 958 snaps, you're talking about an Ole Miss defense that in the totality of the season ended up playing. Forgive me, I'm trying to pull up the entire snap count here defensively for Ole Miss on the year. Okay, here it is. They played 1,044 defensive snaps. So he played 958 out of 1,044 defensive snaps. Dude came off the field for less than 100 snaps on the entire season. I mean, 40 to 8. I mean, 80. He missed 86 snaps on the whole season over 15 games. It's incredible. So maybe part of that decreased grades is the fact that he just never came off the field. Like, what if you got a breather? And maybe that's where having Witt, Dottery, and then very experienced backups in Devon Keys and Tylen Singleton could end up serving LSU well in this instance. Because, now you're talking about a situation where Witt Weeks hopefully is able to stay healthy and play an entire season. You had Dottery, so you have a 4th-year linebacker in Weeks, a 5th-year linebacker in Dottery, who just led the SEC in tackles. And then you could throw in a guy like, as we mentioned, Devon Keys, who played 572 defensive snaps on the season. Tylen Singleton played 147. All that to say, you got depth. You got depth and rotation, and maybe that can keep these guys fresh and even more productive than they were a season ago. So TJ Dottery is a guy that maybe doesn't get the headlines in this portal class like Sam Levitt, like Jordan Seaton. Maybe even, obviously, when you talk about getting Prince Willuman-Mielen, who is the number 1 edge rusher in this class late in the cycle, Dottery may not be the headliner that a lot of people are going to talk about. But when you talk about Blake Baker, who, by the way, of course, is a linebackers coach. Now, Baker's going to shift this year and coach the Stars, but he's going to have an impact on the linebackers. And that position group that's losing West Weeks, that is just, it feels like a massively impactful, like a steak and potatoes. It may not be the sizzle. It may not be the fancy dessert or the expensive bottle of wine, but like the meat and potatoes of the meal that you have to have right in the middle of your defense. Dottery could very well be a huge part of that. And man, when you really start to peel back the layers of the onion of who TJ Dottery is, Lane Kiffin said a mouthful about his willingness to leave his comfort zone, to come to a place like LSU. Was on the SEC's leadership council, guy that Kiffin really trusts, could be a massively impactful ad for LSU, even if just for one season in 2026. TJ Dottery, new LSU linebacker. We'll be looking forward to seeing him on the field with the rest of the squad when the Tigers hit the field in spring, a little more than a month from right now. Of course, we'll be covering it all the way along right here on Locked on LSU. So do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. I know I mentioned it before, but if you do watch on YouTube, I am so sincerely grateful. That is awesome. And keep watching on YouTube. But please, if you would, it would be a massive help to me. Even if you watch the show on YouTube, if you would just go into your favorite podcast app, find Locked on LSU, and just hit the subscribe button, that would be awesome. I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay, y'all, until next time, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day.